Hey guys, Peter Franson here from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. Well, I am excited to talk to you guys about a little indie game called Infernax, put out by Berserk Studio. This one's $20 on Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Xbox Series X and S, and Microsoft Windows. I have been playing it through Game Pass on a Series X. I've spent around 3 hours with the game so far and definitely plan to continue playing it. I would describe it as an NES-style side-scrolling action RPG with some Metroidvania elements, mainly in terms of the level structure, I suppose. Aesthetically, it's inspired by, I think, the NES Castlevania games and just kind of gothic horror fantasy in general. It feels genuinely within the constraint, of an NES game in both the visuals and the sound, and in a really good way. The music in particular is clearly written with that particular skill set, requiring intricate counterpoint and catchy melodies to make up for the limited amount of tones that can be played simultaneously on the NES. So it's a constraint that results in a very particular style of musical composition that defines the era that's being mimicked. And in all respects, the game mimics the era so well that I could almost believe this was a game that was made in the 80s or 90s and never got released because it was too hardcore for the Nintendo seal of approval. The core gameplay of Infernax involves fighting through connected levels that are less labyrinthian than a symphony-style Castlevania game, but that still involve backtracking frequently and exploration while kind of pushing your luck to find that next health and mana-restoring save point or make it back to one that you've already found. The basic moment-to-moment action, combat, and platforming also feels a lot, I think, like a classic Castlevania game from the NES era. However, unlike those NES titles, in Infernax you gain XP and gold from every enemy you kill, with more being gained from tougher enemies. This allows you, if you want, to grind the endlessly respawning enemies for more XP, which you can spend toward boosting health, attack power, or mana, or you can use the coins you get from enemies to buy equipment and spells. However, if you do need to lean on grinding to offset the game's unapologetic old-school difficulty, it may take some time unless you use cheat codes. There is a casual difficulty setting that makes enemies easier to kill and allows you to respawn close to where you died instead of the last save point, as well as retain your XP and gold. But when that isn't enough, the game includes readily available cheat codes delivered in the fashion of a love letter to the Game Genie on the NES, which allow you to be invincible, including eliminating knockback, and have infinite jumps. And I've already found more codes that other people have found online that you can input using that same user interface. So whether damaging or platforming pitfalls are getting you down, you can use these codes, like I so often did back in the day, to shrug off a game's difficulty and fully enjoy the world that the developers crafted without frustration or repetition tempting me to stop short of seeing the game through to the end. And if you don't want the full-on invincible cakewalk experience, which I don't necessarily want either, you can just turn on invincibility for a little while to easily farm coin and XP from a super tough mini-boss that respawns each time you exit and re-enter his screen. Then after you've done that for a little bit, go to a save point, upgrade your stats to a more comfortable place, and turn off invincibility again. Having these options makes me feel like these developers have been freaking reading my diary. I love the gothic horror fantasy aesthetic, but in the last 5 years, every other developer seems to think that using those aesthetics demands that the player also have a brutally difficult and punishing gameplay experience, which I have zero interest in. Turn off my achievements and trophies, or put the label Wimpy Cheater next to my username for all I care. Just let me cheat if I want to, so I can see all the fantastic world, creatures, characters, and story that you've created, developers. So thank you, Berserk Studio, you guys get me. And speaking of story, Infernax includes a light and simple story in which your character is a lord returning from the Crusades to discover that a dark evil has overtaken his lands. words. The writing contains hallmarks of simplicity and even awkward phrasing now and then that are reminiscent of the NES era and that I found very charming. As you explore and encounter both monsters and NPCs, you'll accept or reject quests and make choices involving helping or hurting people a number of times, all of which yield rewards to make you stronger or change elements of the story. Currently, HowLongToBeat.com lists an average completion time for Infernax ranging from 6 to 7.5 hours, which sounds good to me, especially since it looks like a second playthrough making different choices will be well worth my time if I continue to enjoy the first playthrough all the way to the end. As far as moral, philosophical, or spiritual themes, so far in just the first 3 hours that I've played, it doesn't seem like they're making any serious statements, and the marketing for the game suggests that they're leaning into dark and violent elements more for humor and nostalgia. I think the backdrop of the Crusades and the religious elements that come with that are more cliche, tropes type things than actually them making a commentary so far. But the pieces are there for some commentary on spiritual issues if they wanted to use them. The Crusades are a horrible and tragic period that is unfortunately associated with Christians, although the Crusades themselves were motivated by agendas far outside of actual biblical thinking and biblical teaching. Even so, the main character is ostensibly some kind of Christian, or perhaps in his own mind at least, and his quest is to destroy these horrific supernatural evils. So I'm curious if the nature of that evil, once fully revealed, will be the demonic or satanic enemy implied so far, or could perhaps involve a twist that makes commentary on the nature of the main character, or possibly even commentary on his faith. So I'll have to keep playing to find out. I purchased a month of Game Pass in order to do this review, and I want to thank my supporters at patreon.com/SpiritBlade Productions for making that possible. I imagine that I'll be able to fully experience what I want from Infernax within that single month, but if I were to purchase this one, I think I'd wait for a sale. $20 is just a bit more than I want to pay as a hardcore bargain shopper. $15 feels about right for the experience I'm having so far. That I'd be happy to pay $15. And $10, or especially, my gosh, $5 would probably feel like a great deal or a steal, respectively. So those are all my thoughts for now about Infernax. For my updated thoughts on the games I review, be sure to check out the Christian Geek Central podcast, where I give weekly updates on my thoughts about the games I'm playing and also provide expanded responses to many of your YouTube comments. So I hope you will check me out there soon and enjoy us as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye. Summer insanity.
Liberate butter. What am I gonna do?